Welcome to this week's edition of CEO Corner. I'm Otis Rawl, President and CEO of the South Carolina Chamber of Commerce, and we're happy to have Darrell Scott with us today, the Vice President for Public Policy. And what we want to do is talk a little bit about what we see happening in this session of the General Assembly that began 2 weeks ago and will end in June. We'll talk about some issues, what we predict to happen, and we'll see how it actually transforms into bills and debate within the Senate and within the House. So, Darrell, let's talk a little bit. The House had a very active year last year. They sent a lot of their legislation over to the Senate. Senate's got a full plate. House may not quite have the plate that they had last year simply since they got so much off of it. So let's talk about what's going to happen in the Senate over the next couple weeks. What's first and foremost on their agenda?
Yeah, as you mentioned, the House cleared out their legislative agenda last year. They built a 2-year agenda and actually got it done in 1 year. So you'll see them come back and add a few items to their agenda. But the Senate right now is debating the Department of Administration bill. Governor Haley had that queued up at the end of last session. Right. It's something that's important to the business community that we've talked about. So we see that over the next couple weeks. Hopefully we'll get past that. I think you'll see a big initiative in both the House and Senate for some reform to the state retirement system, which obviously has an impact on spending at the state and local level. And then hopefully we've got a new piece of legislation that's about to be introduced on the House and Senate side dealing with the Smith Land Company case and the Pollution Control Act, which hopefully will take center stage in the Senate this session.
All right, so let's talk specifically about restructuring. A couple things in the restructuring bill, particularly around Department of Administration, elections with the governor and lieutenant governor, superintendent of education. Talk about each one of those pieces, Darrell, to kind of let everybody know what they're talking about.
Right. The Department of Administration bill ostensibly will most likely eliminate the Budget and Control Board and transfer a lot of those administrative day-to-day functions to the governor's office and get the legislature out of that process, or the Budget and Control Board. That will likely get done through the Senate this year. The lieutenant governor, the joint ticket governor, lieutenant governor, still in the queue, may or may not happen this year. And then the superintendent of education is a little bit further down on the pecking order.
Well, I know that Superintendent Zay said he supported making an appointed position, so that kind of takes the politics out of it somewhat, at least from that standpoint. Another piece of what they're talking about restructuring is creating rainy day funds and doing some type of cap on spending. What do you see happening there? Right.
A couple years ago, we helped, and the legislature passed a constitutional amendment to put more funds in the reserve funds, in the rainy day funds. So the follow-up measure to that is to create that state spending cap in the form of a constitutional amendment, so it couldn't be changed throughout the years in good times or bad times. So Speaker Pro Tem Glenn McConnell has cleared that bill out of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and we think we'll see that on the floor very soon. It creates a 10-year rolling average, so it balances the high points and the low points in the spending cycle and helps smooth out that curve.
Well, another issue, if you want to consider it restructuring, is that Senator Greg Ryberg has been holding meetings most of the fall trying to address the unfunded liability in our state retirement system and also in our health care system. And if depending on the numbers you look at, it anywhere from 20 to 25 million if you combine those two. What do you see? Let's talk about the retirement system first. What do you see the Senate and the House doing there?
Well, you've got Chairman Leatherman create an ad hoc committee that Chairman Ryberg sits on, and then on the House side, there's an ad hoc committee. Chairman Brian White, Kenny Bingham serving at the helm of that. I think you'll see them try to get something done this session, since there hasn't been a bill passed in the House or the Senate. I think you'll see them not bite off too much, and I think you'll see some easy things, if you want to call them easy, taking the retirement age to 30 years, doing away with Terry, having to be 62 or older before you begin to collect, some kind of combined age service, that equals 90 years, so that at least from a standpoint you start to stop the hemorrhaging, and then maybe in future years you come back and deal with vesting issues and things like that.
Well, right, interesting that you start talking about how they go fund it. And I think the only way that you can make some significant changes that will address the unfunded liability, but I think the General Assembly is also talking about using some of the budgeted surplus this year to put in the unfunded liability for state retirement. Let's talk about the budget as a whole. About $1 billion plus or minus new dollars, part of it recurring, part of it non-recurring. A lot of requests out there, $1.7 billion worth of requests. What happens? First of all, let's talk about the port. That's probably first and foremost in a lot of our members' mind. What do you see the General Assembly doing in regards to the port?
Well, there's obviously a lot of interest in the port. In the past couple years, we've seen us struggle to get a couple $100,000 to get the feasibility study and get that going. So as we've got some better times than we've had in the budget over years past, I think you'll see legislators devote the project dollars, the construction dollars of dredging, go ahead and appropriate those this year. It's a $300 million project.
Right.
Of that, the state shares about $180 million, federal shares about $120 million. Governor Haley has set up in her executive budget a state port infrastructure fund, but I think you'll see maybe maybe the legislature go a little bit above and beyond that $180 million. I think there's some concern that in 4 or 5 years, when the port's ready for those dollars, that maybe there's some uncertainty at the federal level whether they can get those federal dollars
Right.
or not. So, hey, in good times, let's go ahead and take care of that issue and take it off the table.
Well, one of the things that, of course, gives the business community concern is state agencies run in deficits. Mm-hmm. And it looks like Health and Human Service Commission's going to run another deficit this year. Depending on the numbers that you look at, it could be anywhere from $250 million to supply the dollars for the current program, and then another anticipated $103 million if the program's expanded. I know that when you start talking about Medicaid, a couple years ago we had 750,000 people on Medicaid. Now we almost got 1 million. How's the General Assembly address this problem?
Yeah, I think you've seen Director Tony Keck go ahead and request more dollars, probably in the neighborhood of $350 million. Not so much for deficits, but just with these tough economic times, that Medicaid population, as you referenced, continues to expand. And he's doing his best to try to manage those costs. But I think you'll see that consume a great bit of the $1 billion surplus, if you will. But you've got the port aspect in front of us. Obviously, state agencies that have been cut over the last few years, they're going to be at the table looking for some more revenue and funds.
Well, let me just ask a question here, particularly on education, Darrell. Mm-hmm. I know that's first and foremost in a lot of ways, and there's all different kind of pieces and parts. You got the technical colleges with Ready SC, CAT, and those types of things. You got 4-year universities that have been cut substantially down to single digits in state appropriate funds. You got EEDA, which is really important to the business community and keeping that funded. Plus you've got the amount of EFA funding and other funding going back. How do you see all those things being massaged together and what comes out?
Yeah, I think it's going to be extremely difficult. I think you'll see an effort to increase the base student cost for K through 12 education. Right. You'll see the colleges and universities, the comprehensive colleges, 4-year research, try to get some more sustainable funding. I'm not sure how that will play out. Obviously, though, the cost of education, the affordability of a public education in South Carolina is getting more expensive by the day. So I think you'll have to address that at some point. But from a business standpoint, I think it's critical. The legislature, the Budget Control Board's always made sure they protect Ready SC and CAT. And I think with the numbers that you see, with the graduation rates going up, high school dropouts going down, I think a lot of legislators really want to make sure they put the appropriate number of dollars into EEDA.
Well, I know one thing that we're hearing from our CEOs and they're hearing from their own employees is that a 4-year degree is almost unaffordable now. The state used to pay somewhere between 40 and 50%. through state funds for tuition now is 7 to 8%. So big issue. Don't have to comment on it, but it is a big issue of affordable education now for our folks.